Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. This is the fourth session on our course of Ibn Arabi's religious pluralism. And if any of you are new here, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It would help to go back to the previous sessions so that you'll know what's going on here, because each session builds up on the previous one. It's kind of like an argument that I'm constructing. And it's slightly sophisticated argument. So I'm hoping that by the time we're done with this whole course, you guys will have like a very potent and powerful tool for engaging with real interfaith dialogue or interreligious discourse with any tradition in the entire world, like a very serious one that has the power to be effective metaphysically and legally in both cases. I mean, in terms of Sharia. Okay, so last week, what did we cover? We talked about abrogation, nasakh, and what does that mean? What does that entail? And that abrogation is best represented by the Risala al-Muhammadiyya, right? Which is a subset of the Risalatul Illahiyya, right? And the Muhammadan Risala, by definition, implies that all humans are subject to his Sharia and are obligated to respond to his call. That is his haqq. That is what the Muhammadan Risala means. It obligates the entire, the whole of humanity. And that's what makes every human being accountable. They are held accountable in the next world for this, given that the mission of Muhammad is all-encompassing, something that no prophet had before him, because every prophet before him was just sent to a specific qawm, right? Not every person on the face of the planet is responsible for responding to that prophet's message. It's only with Muhammad that becomes the case. So it is in that sense that the sun's light overwhelms the light of the stars and annihilates them, right? That's their fana. So that's annihilation. The stars become unseen when the sun rises, which is the sun of Islam, and the stars are the other religions. And so they appear to be no longer existent to your eyesight, right? So the other religions appear to no longer exist. But that is only in appearance. In reality, the stars are still present, they're just unseen. So it's the same with the other religions. And so we now need to see how this is the case. And if you can grasp this double side to the metaphor, then you have like a really powerful tool that can be used to like really engage with other traditions in a very serious manner. And you can be taken very seriously. And furthermore, these religions don't become batil through abrogation. That is the opinion of the ignorant. Okay, so now we're on the side that talks about subsistence, al-baqa. How do they subsist through Islam? So let's get into it. Now, Ibn Arabi talks about the same sun-star metaphor in several places throughout the Futuhat and in his other writings too, but it would take us too long to go through all of them. I mean, so the other examples are in my book, right? So we'll just go through a few brief examples in this presentation. So he says in another place, through proofs, you know that the stars possess a light that spreads over the earth, but you do not perceive it. That's one quote. A second quote is this. Nevertheless, they, the stars, do in fact exist, just as the existence of the light of the stars is actualized. Third quote. But do you not see that the Prophet ﷺ, when God sealed the prophets through him, he was given the all-comprehensive words, Jawami' al-Kalam. All the divinely revealed laws became subsumed in darajat within his law, his sharia, in the same manner in which the lights of the stars are subsumed within the sun's light. Hence, one knows for certain that the stars have cast their rays upon the earth, but the sun prevents us from distinguishing between them. So he made the light belong to the sun alone, right? Now, how do the other religions subsist and remain? They actually remain in a number of ways. There's actually a number of ways in which they remain, but I only want to take you through one of them in this session. This is the primary mechanism that is used to allow the other religions to subsist under Islamic rule, historically speaking. But there's other ways, and we'll go through them in the other sessions. For now, we're only going to look into the jizya, right? Which is the poll tax. The jizya is the poll tax, right? So we'll go through that first, and it's from there we'll branch out into the other ways they subsist. But it starts from here, right? So he has more than one paragraph, but I'll just go through only one paragraph for this session. So he says, Shaykh al-Akbar in the Futuhat, when God abrogated all other laws through his Sharia, Muhammad, this abrogation did not remove the laws that proceeded from being Muhammad's law, right? That's one point. The other laws still remain his law. They're his. Every single Sharia on the face of the earth belongs to him. And this is because of the thing we talked about last time about the Haqiqat and Muhammadiyya, right? Which makes all the Sharia belong to him. So God has testified to us the existence of abrogation in his manifest law, revealed to the prophets in the Quran and the Sunnah, together with our consensus, our ijma, and agreements that whatever was abrogated belongs to his Sharia. Therefore, that which came later abrogated that which came before, because in terms of time, temporal succession, the Prophet's law, by definition, abrogates what came before it. So this is an indication to us that his abrogation of all the former laws does not remove them from being his law. Now, included in the rule of Muhammad, if we call this the Mamlakat al-Muhammadiyya, the Muhammadan kingdom, right? Mamlakat al-Muhammadiyya. What is included in his hukm, in his rule, are what the Ahl al-Kitab, the Ahl al-Dhimma, from the Ahl al-Kitab are upon, as long as they give the jizya from their hand and are humble, right? Right? So this is an ayah from the Quran, and we'll see what it means in a minute. Who are the Ahl Kitab? They are the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. Who are the Ahl Dhimma? They are the ones who have made a contract and a covenant with the Islamic State to remain under their authority, right? And that gives them permission to practice their own laws, historically speaking. So historically, the jizya was a mechanism for mitigating the acts of war and conflict in the pre-modern world, right? Especially if you're a growing state or empire. You're almost always going to clash with other empires or states. That's the nature of the pre-modern world. So this is how they used to deal with each other. So the jizya allowed two different groups of people to coexist, albeit the group of people who, so how did the jizya come about in the first place, right? You'd have one state that fights another. The jizya is discussed in the context of warfare, battles. So when one group of people lose the battle, they become subordinate to the state that was victorious. So whenever we talk about the jizya, it's always in the context of war. Not every time, but certainly that's the basis of why the jizya is imposed, right? So what is the ayah? It comes from Surah Tawbah. This is the foundational verse upon which this whole thing is based, which says, fight those who do not believe in God nor the last day, and do not prohibit what God and his messenger have prohibited, nor follow the religion of truth amongst those who have been given the book until they pay the jizya humbled. And that last clause is the key clause in that ayah. حتى يعطوا الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون. Right? Now, Surah Toba in general is quite a harsh surah because it's the only surah in the Quran that does not begin with the what? It does not begin with the Bismillah. So every chapter surah in the Quran begins with the Bismillah Rahman Rahim, except for Surah Toba, which signals to us the severity of its nature. Now, Shaykh al-Akbar makes a remarkable observation. He says, yes, that's on the surface of the surah, but actually the surah contains many hidden rahmah. It contains a lot of hidden rahmah, but it's just not apparent to the eye, but it's there. And so he says, for example, the Bismillah of the Surah Tawbah is actually present. Quick trivia. Where is the Bismillah of the Surah Tawbah, right? Where is the Bismillah? Given that, like when you finish the surah before that, which I think is Surah Al-Anfal, or is it, yeah, Surah Al-Anfal, you don't go to the next surah with Bismillah, you just go straight on to the first ayah of Surah Tawbah. Where is the Bismillah of Surah Tawbah? If you go to Surah An-Naml, right, the chapter on the ants, there is a verse when the Queen of Sheba receives the letter from whom? Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, from Sulaiman. That's right. And then she says, and it is a noble writing, a noble letter, which begins, وَإِنَّهُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. So Sheikh Al-Akbar says, the Bismillah of Surah Tawbah got transferred to Surah Naml. So it's actually still there. So what is the purpose of the jizya? Now, there are Muslims and non-Muslims who understand that the jizya's purpose is to humiliate non-Muslims. I don't like that interpretation. I'm not a fan of this tafsir. I think it is incorrect, whether a Muslim says it or a non-Muslim says it. This is my opinion. Now, as we will see also with Sheikh Al-Akbar, he subscribes to a different understanding of what the purpose of the jizya is, right? Now, for Imam Malik, he says that its purpose is to subordinate the other people of other religions to the Islamic State. So it's primarily about subordination. Now, the Mufassirun look at the phrase "an yadan" when they give the jizya by hand. What does that expression mean? Ibn Rushd al-Jad, who is the grandfather of the other Ibn Rushd al-Hafid, who meets Ibn Arabi, he's a mufassir and he's also like a qadi. They're actually like a family of judges. So he says it means one, the jizya, the wealth, the money is taken by power, by virtue of force, by being the dominant party, or it has a second meaning, which means blessing. And it is a ni'mah. How is it a ni'mah? It is a ni'mah because the jizya is a way to spare the lives of the other combatants that you're fighting, the other people you're fighting. And so instead of engaging in bloodshed, you forego bloodshed. So it becomes a form of blessing and is a mighty blessing. هي نعمة عظيمة, right? Now, the majority of mufassirun, exegetes, and jurists, fuqaha, they give some attention to the next phrase, which is وَهُمْ صَاغِرُونَ. What does that clause mean? And they are in a state of being humbled. Now, you can translate that as also they're in a state of humiliation. I hate that translation. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it, right? I do not think that the purpose of the jizya is to humiliate people. I don't, right? So I think it has a slightly different shade of meaning. So the other mufassirun try to spell out. So for example, Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, not our Ibn Arabi, another one, right? He's called Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi al-Maliki. In his tafsir, he gives like a number of possibilities of what it means, وَهُمْ صَاغِرُونَ, right? So it could be that the other people who are subordinates are, I guess, vassals of the state. The vassal is made to pay out the jizya while walking, for example. Again, it can be taken by show of power, even showing you're asked to show one's neck, for example, as a sign of subordination. And there's a number of possibilities, right? And one of them is humiliation, right? I don't agree with this. Again, so for me, that begs a key question, right? Is humiliation an intrinsic part of the jizya? I say it's not. For me, it's not, and I'll give my own reasons as to why it's not. If you, right, is it an intrinsic requirement based on what faith you belong to, right? So if you happen to belong to a different faith, you should be intrinsically humiliated. I say no, right? And there's a whole argument I give in the book, so I can't go into the details of the argument right now, and I can explain to whoever wants to hear it later on, right? But it's based on a cross-reference with a number of other Quranic verses, which uses the same phrase "وهم صاغرون" and explains what it means, right? So there's a lot of nuance in this. But the gist of it, the gist of the whole idea, is that this phrase "وهم صاغرون" always comes in a state of conflict when you're in a conflict with two parties, right? But it does not address the question of what happens when two parties are not fighting, right? And one is Muslim, the other is non-Muslim. What do you do then, right? So that's a different story. And then the Sheikh Al-Akbar himself in Fasl Isa in the Fusus al-Hikam, he gives the meaning of وهم صاغرون as a form of tawadu', which is humility, right? Which is a Christian virtue, right? Uh, being humbled. Um, if you're in a state of war and conflict, I think it stands to reason that it's possible, at least potentially possible, that one side is being oppressive. That's where the context of that verse comes from. So you want to remove that warring party's oppression, right? Which means by humbling them. But it does not necessarily entail humiliation. It actually could entail guiding them, right? And I explain that in my book, but that's not the central point of this presentation or what we're going to look at next. What is the purpose of the jizya? Sheikh Al-Akbar talks about it in a number of places, right? And so this is historically how we relate it to other religions, right? So we'll go into that in a minute and right now. So we'll start with Fas Yunus from the Fusus al-Hikam, right? So this is it. Okay, let's get into it. So he says, Fasu hikmatan nafsiyatan, or it can be nafasiyya, fi kalimatan yunusiyya, right? This is the fuss of Saint Yunus alayhi salam, right? So then he says, علم أن هذه نشأة الإنسانية بكمالها روحا وجسما ونفسا خلقها الله على صورته, right? So know that this human configuration and body, which is created spirit and bodily and soul, was made by Allah upon His own form. فلا يتولى حل نظامها إلا من خلقها, right? So it's not permissible for someone to dissolve this form, to make it go away, right? In other words, to destroy it. It's not permissible for someone to destroy it, right? He whom Allah made with His own hand. إما, right? إلا من خلقها إما بيده, except for the one who made the human body by His own hand, which is God. وليس إلا ذلك, and there's nothing except that in the universe, right? Which Allah made by His own hand. Everything's made by His own hand. That's all there is. So only He has the right to destroy it. أو بأمره, or by His explicit command. ومن تولاها بغير أمر الله فقد ظلم نفسه, right? If he does it, if he does not do it by God's command, then he has oppressed himself and he's an oppressor. وتعدى حد الله فيها, and he has transgressed the limits of God that He set down. وسعى or سعي وسعى في خراب من أمره الله بعمارته, and he has hastened and striven to destroy what God Himself built, right? Who is he referring to? Someone who gets angry and quickly hastens to destroy the human configuration. Who is he talking about? By the way, Maham, that's a good point. Let me come back to that in the end, but that's also a good point. He is talking about Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salam, right? When he's hasty. Because what do you do? You see, the Sheikh Al-Akbar doesn't need to mention the story because everyone knows the story. All he needs to do is mention the name, and everyone knows the name straight away. When he ran away from his people, when Allah did not command him to do that, and He said, I'll leave them to their fate. which is just another way of destroying them. And so Allah taught him a lesson for that, right? The story is well known. So Sayyidina, by the way, Sayyidina alayhi salam, that's a different episode based on a similar idea. What comes to that in Fasl Nuh? Yes, that is related. But here he means Sayyidina Yunus. وعلم أن شفقة على عباد الله أحق بالرعاية من الغير في الله. Right? Now that's like a mind blower, that statement, right? Knows that having compassion and pity, right? Care for the servants of God is more important, right? It is more important to take care of that, right? Ri'aya is an important word. It's more important to safeguard the servants of God by taking care of them with pity and compassion than having regard for God's right through his jealousy, right? Than being jealous for God's right. That's actually the phrase. It's more important to save people's lives than being jealous for God's own right. That's an astonishing statement. وَأَرَادَ دَاوُودُ بُنْيَانَ. So now he gives us another hikayah that's less well known. وأراد داوود بنيان البيت المقدس فبناه مرارا. Right? He tried to build God's holy house several times. Right? But he couldn't do it. فكلما فرغ منه تهدم, it would be destroyed every time. فشك ذلك إلى الله, so he complained to God. فأوحى الله إليه, so Allah revealed to him, إن بيتي هذا لا يقوم على يدي من سفك الدماء. What does that mean? My house would not be built by someone whose hand spilled blood. فقال داود يا ربي ألم يكن ذلك في سبيلك? But didn't I spill blood for your own sake, in your own path? قال بلى, yeah, of course you did. ولكنهم أليسوا عبادي, but aren't they my servants? Irrespective. قال يا ربي فاجعل بنيانه على يدي من هو مني, so please let my own descendant make it. فأوحى الله إليه, so Allah revealed to him, your son Solomon will build it. فالسيد الشيخ الأكبر فالغرض من هذه الحكاية مراعاة هذه النشأة الإنسانية. The whole point of that story is to talk about the importance of saving, protecting this human configuration, which is the human body, human lives. وأن إقامتها أولى من هدمها. And it's more important. There's priority. You give priority to saving it as opposed to destroying it. You give priority to saving it over destroying it. ألا ترى عدو الدين قد فرض الله في حقهم الجزية. Don't you see how the enemies of God's religion, so we're talking about people who intend to destroy his religion, his actual enemies, he has imposed jizya on them. Don't you see that? والصلح إبقاء عليهم, and reconciliation is called sulh, reconciling the warring parties, and he has done that to let them subsist. قال وإن جنحوا للسلم فاجنح لها وتوكل. So then if one of the parties inclines towards peace, you incline towards peace as well. ألا ترى من وجب عليه القصاص. Now he gives you a third example, right? من وجب عليه القصاص كيف شرع لولي الدم أخذ الفدية أو العفو. So when it comes to someone, that gives you a third case about the law, when someone has murdered another person, right? The guilty party ought to be slain, right? That's what's called qisas. The relatives of the victim have the right to ask that the murderer be executed. But he says, don't you see that God has given the option to be pardoned, right? فإن أبى, right? But if they refuse to forgive, if the relatives refuse to forgive the murderer, that's when he is slain. فحينئذ يقتل. But ألا تراه, and he's got an interesting شرعي interpretation of this. ألا تراه سبحانه إذا كان أولياء الدم جماعة فرضي واحد بالدية أو عفاء وباقي الأولياء لا يريدون إلا القتل, right? Sorry. لا يريدون إلا القتل كيف يراعى من عفا ويرجح على من لم يعفو. Right? فلا يقتل قصاصا. So all it takes is for one of the members of the family to say, I want him pardoned and I want the blood money in exchange. Then he's not executed. Although it's interesting because in another interpretation, so if you have like 5 members and all of them want to forgive him except one person, then he's executed. Sheikh Al-Akbar is saying it's the other way around. If you have 5 members and all of them want him executed, but one person wants to save him, then he's saved. And the blood money is accepted, right? ألا تراه عليه السلام يقول في صاحب النسعة. So this is with regard to a story from a hadith, right? What he says about someone who's, I think it was his brother who was killed, right? And then the relative wanted to take revenge. So then Rasul said, if you kill him, right, then you're the same as him. If you kill him, you're the same as him. Now he's talking about this because the man who was killed, he was killed through involuntary manslaughter. So the relative still wanted revenge, right? So it's an evil act. ألا تراه تعالى يقول, don't you see how God said, وجزاء سيئة سيئة مثلها? The recompense of an evil act is another evil act. What's the evil act? Retaliation. So even though you have the right to retaliate, he still calls it an evil act, right? So from first units, we can see that the first purpose of the jizya is to spare people's lives and provide an alternative to people becoming destroyed, stopping bloodshed, and honoring the human body and its sanctity, right? Then we come to the second example from chapter 275, right? So that's the first purpose. The second purpose is this. وأما تبرئ المسلم ممن استند إليه المشرك. So now he's going to go into who is the jizya imposed upon. It's imposed upon you don't impose the jizya on the mushrik, who's the associate, the associator. Why? Right? وأما تبرئ المسلم ممن استند إليه المشرك فليس تبرؤه إلا من النسبة ومن المنسوب إليه لا من المنسوب. Right? So he's going into the reason as to why we do that. I don't want to explain it now, but if you ask me again in the end, I'll explain what he means by that. But the point is that the mushrik and the Muslim are really they're two different categories. There's nothing to relate them to one another, right? Because the mushrik depends upon the idol. The Muslim does not depend upon the idol, even though they both worship divinity, because the mushrik thinks that the idol is divine. So they both worship divinity, but the mushrik is ascribing the divinity to the wrong being, to the idol, as opposed to God, right? فاجتمع المشرك والمسلم في المنسوب, right? That's the quality of divinity. وافترقا في المنسوب إليه والنسبة, and they come apart, they differ with regard to whom you attribute divinity to, which is either idol or God, right? With who you worship God or the idol. ولهذا, and so it's because of this, لم تضرب الجزية على المشرك. It's for that reason we don't impose the jizya on the mushrik. وفرق بينه وبين كفار من أهل الكتاب المنزلة, and he's distinguished from the أهل الكتاب who have revealed books. فإن المشرك قادح في الحق وفي الكون. Because the mushrik, he is someone who, the word qadih means to like malign. It also means to like to slander someone. But in this case, it means to malign God and the truth. قادح في الحق وفي الكون. What does he mean by kawn? He means the messengers, right? So they are slandering or maligning or attacking God and the messengers with their shirk. فلم يكون له مستند يعصمه من القتل. So he has nothing to protect him from being fought. لأنه قدح في التوحيد وفي الرسول, because he has maligned tawheed, which is unity, and the messengers. والكفار but as for the unbelievers from the Ahl Kitab, لم يقدحوا في التوحيد. They don't malign tawheed, right? They do not attack the foundations of tawheed, right? ولا في الكون, nor do they attack creation. And what I mean by creation are the messengers. لكن قدحوا في رسولا معينا لهوى أو شبهة قائمة بنفوسهم. But they attack a certain messenger due to a suspicion they have regarding that messenger, or to some whimsical misunderstanding regarding that messenger. أداهم, which led them, ما قام بهم إلى جحود الحق ظلما وعلوا, which led them to do juhud, and juhud is to deny, which led them to denying God or the truth unjustly and arrogantly. But مع اليقين, even though they're certain, مع اليقين به, even though they're certain in Him and God. وإما لشبهة وإما لشبهة قامت بهم لم يثبت صدق صاحب الدعوة عندهم. So it's because of the doubt that they have within themselves regarding the truthfulness of the person who's calling them to Islam, right? It's not that his truthfulness is not established for them. In other words, they're not convinced by his proofs, right? That's why they don't believe in Muhammad. They're not convinced by the truths of the person calling them to Islam, right? فلهذا كان لهم في الجملة مستند صحيح عندهم. That's why the foundation they're basing themselves upon is right. You see, they're acting correctly because they don't know that the person calling them to Islam is correct. They're not sure, so they reject it. So their foundation is correct. بس لا في نفس الأمر, but they're not right in the actual situation itself, because the actual situation is that Muhammad is a prophet, right? يعصمهم من القتل, and that's what protects them from being fought against. فضربت عليهم وترك عليهم ليقيموا أو يقيموا بعضه على قدر ما يوفقون إليه. So they're left to establish the religion by paying the jizya, or to establish a part of the religion, or all of it, right? Depending on how much God helps them to do that. وهنا نقطة. And from here, there is a delicate point, which means, when he says that, it means perk your ears up and listen up. I'm going to say something important. وهنا نقطة لمن فهم أن دينهم مشروع لهم بشرعنا. Right? Here, there's a delicate point, and it is for the one who can understand it, and is that their religion is lawful for them through our law. And that's the basis of this whole entire thing. Their religion is lawful for them in accordance with our law, but it has to be through our Sharia. That's the catch. If you can find a hukm for them through our law, their religion becomes lawful for them. حيث قررهم عليه, whereby they're confirmed upon the religion. ولهذا كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So it's because of this that Rasulullah إذا سمع أن الروم قد ظهرت على فارس يظهر السرور في وجهه. Right? So it's because of that when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah, when he heard that Rome had prevailed and was victorious over Persia, because there's two empires, the Roman Christian Empire, Byzantine, and the Persian Empire. So when the Romans won against the Persians, he smiled. A smile appeared on his face, even though مع كون روم كافرين به, even though Rome disbelieved in him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ولكن الرسول لعلمه, but because the Messenger of God, due to his knowledge, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, كان منصفا, he was fair, he was just, he was balanced in his opinion. لأنه علم أن مستند روم, because he knew that the foundation on which Rome was based is the same foundation استند إليه أهل الحق. It's the same one that the people of God are based themselves on. So they too, لأنهم أهل الكتاب, so because they are people of the book, مؤمنون به, they believe in him. Now, Sheikh Al-Akbar doesn't specify who him is. It could be God. It could also be Muhammad, because in their books, they're required to believe in Muhammad according to us. لكنهم طرأت عليهم شبهة, but it's because a misunderstanding, a doubt overcame them. من تحريف أئمتهم, because of a misunderstanding that occurred due to their own leaders, not leaders, their scholars, because their scholars distorting their own books. Because of that, right? ما أنزل عليهم حالة, right? With regard to what was revealed to them. So, because their scholars distorted their books, right? حالت بينهم وبين الإيمان والإقرار بنبوة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. They were that doubt came between them and their belief and confirmation of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they're required to confirm his prophethood, but they didn't, because their books were distorted according to us. What does that mean? In the universality of his mission, because even in Sheikh Akbar's time, some of the people of the book were saying, we believe Muhammad is a prophet, but it's not for us. So we say, no, it is obligatory upon you to believe that he's a prophet for the whole of mankind, including you, right? وكلامنا مع المنصف منهم من علمائهم. But he says, we are talking to the ones who are fair and just amongst their scholars. So what? So in other words, they'll kind of admit this if they're being fair. فعذرهم الشرع بهذا القدر. So the law excuses them to that extent. They are excused. الذي علمه منهم, right? According to what is known about them. وراعى فيهم جناب الحق, and they protect God's side. They protect his side by making him one. حيث وحده. But by the way, I read the sentence differently, because it says الحق, right? It's putting janaba in the mansub, but I put it in the marfu'a. So if you put it in the marfu'a, then it is God, right? God, هو الذي رأى فيهم. God is the one who protects them because they unified him. وما أشركوا به, and they did not associate with them. حين أشرك به فارس, in the same way that Persia did shirk of him. وعبدت الأوثان, and they worshipped idols. وقضحت في التوحيد, and they maligned توحيد الإله, right? وما يستحقه من الأحدية, and what God deserves of the ahadiyya, right? So in other words, they did not give God's due by affirming his ahadiyya, his unicity, right? The fact that he's unique and one. وهكذا حال العارفين من أهل هذا المقام. That's something else, right? I'm going to skip this because we're running out of time, okay? So the purpose of the jizya then is that it's to include other religions under the Sharia of Muhammad and validate them and confirm them. This is why we have something called a doctrine of excuses. The Shaykh al-Akbar always looks for ways to excuse other people and excuse other religions. He has this thing that we can call a doctrine of excuses. Right, okay. And then we have this passage from chapter 36. وَلَوْ كَانَ مِمَّنْ يُؤَدِّي الْجِزْيَةَ. So, لَقُلْنَا, if he is one of those who must give the jizya, that's Christian or Jew, إِنَّ شَرْعَ الْمُحَمَّدِي قَدْ قَرَرَ لَهُ دِينَهُ. Then the Muhammad Sharia has confirmed his religion for him. مَا دَامَ يُعْطِي الْجِزْيَةَ, as long as he pays the jizya. وَهَذِهِ مَسْأَلَةٌ دَقِيقَةٌ فِي عُمُومِ رِسَالَتِهِ. This is a sensitive, not sensitive, this is a nuanced point with regard to the question of the universality of his message, right? وأنه بظهوره لم يبقى شرع إلا ما شرعه. And with the coming of, with the appearance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no law remains except for what he legislates, right? تقريرهم على شرعهم, right? He legislates the confirmation of their law. ما دام يعطون الجزية إذا كان من أهل الكتاب وكم الله تعالى من, I guess no, I'm gonna, okay. وكم من هؤلاء العباد في الأرض, and how many of such servants upon this earth does God have, who are therefore have their religions confirmed for them, right? Then we go to one special line in chapter 337, which gives us the third purpose of the jizya, right? One, to spare lives. Two, to confirm the other religions in their religion, to confirm them and include them in our religion. Third purpose. فَبِإِبْقَائِهُمْ. So by them subsisting على شرعهم, so by letting them subsist in their own laws, شرع محمدي لهم, that is legally permissible according to the Muhammadan Sharia for them. يسعدون بذلك. فيسعدون بذلك. They attain to felicity through that. They become happy, right? Now, I'll explain in a minute what that means. They become happy, right? Because that's a very important phrase. But I just want to quickly talk about who the Ahl Kitab might be, other than Jews and Christians. Because the Shaykh Al-Akbar mentions in the same chapter the Ashab al-Kutub, the people who have books that are revealed for them, right? Or who have books in their religion. They're kind of like the Ahl Kitab, right? But there is now, if we go to the verses in the Quran, right? I want to make a distinction between what's mentioned in the Jizya verse in Surah At-Tawbah and the other places where he talks about the Ahl Kitab, right? The word Ahl means a degree of intimacy. They are intimate with the book. They are family to the book. That's why Allah calls them Ya Ahl Kitab in the Quran, right? In the beginning of the Quran says ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, right? لا ريب فيه. That is the book. There is no doubt about it. What is the book? It is the book of existence. The Quran is the book of existence, right? And the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, are intimate familiars with that book because they receive God's signs and believe in his messengers. So the Ahl Kitab also have the Kitab. That's why we have a relationship with them. But in Surah Tawbah, Allah calls them by a slightly different name. And if we talk about Shaykh Al-Akbar's literalism, he chooses a different word for a certain reason. So he says, الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابِ, which is a slightly different shade of meaning from saying Ahl Kitab. So he didn't call them Ahl Kitab. He called them الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابِ حَتَّى يُعْطُوا الْجِزْيَةِ. I think الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابِ, it does not require the same level of familiarity and intimacy as the Ahl Kitab have. It's just whoever has been given the book. He doesn't have to be familiar with it. So that's why I think, Allahu Alam, that this ayah, because the Shaykh Al-Akbar doesn't say it explicitly, but I think that could include Zoroastrians and Buddhists and Hindus, and Taoists and Confucians, people of other religions, because they have books. They're not Ahl Kitab, but they're الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ, but they were given the book in some manner, shape, and form. They don't have to be familiar with it. They don't have to have the book completely, right? But that's just my theory. Because the Shaykh Al-Akbar, in the same chapter, he talks about the Ashab al-Kutub as being Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians. So that's why I think it might be a possibility. But Allahu Alam, right? So the third purpose of the jizya, in any case, is to be the cause of salvation for other religions. Enabling. And what does that mean? What does it mean for them to be فَيَسْعَدُونَ بِذَلِكَ? So they become felicitous through that. What does that mean? It means salvation. It means they enter paradise along with the Muslims, when historically all these communities, how many of them existed on the earth, when they all paid the jizya, they entered Jannah along with the Muslims. They're all saved. So the Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi, I don't know why that's spelled wrong, spells this out. And he says, what does this mean? So he wrote, because he was reading this sentence out in a session, and there was a man who heard that sentence, and he didn't like it. So he actually called Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi a disbeliever and left. So that caused Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi to write rebutting what that man said and talking about the meaning of that sentence from the Futuhat al-Makkiyah. So it's an extraordinary risala. So Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi explains, listen, فَيَسْعَدُونَ بِذَلِكَ can have two meanings, or even three. One, it means they become happy because they're given permission to practice their religion in this world. And two, they become happy because they enter paradise along with Muslims. And so he says, they are legally, shar'an, assured of happiness by agreeing to pay the jizya and then giving it to the Muslims, because by this they save their lives and protect their property and honor. With this, they become like the Muslims. It is forbidden to fight against them, to interfere with their property and children, and it's forbidden to slander them, curse or defame them, or generally to harm them. A Muslim who kills a dhimmi, a minority, is to be put to death, and it is reported that the Prophet ﷺ executed a Muslim for unjustly killing a dhimmi, right? Now, there is an episode in the Sirah when Rasulullah ﷺ meets a group of Christian delegates who come from Najran. They are the Najranis. And from the episode, we get the famous Mubahala episode, right? When Rasulullah says, let us all bring together our people, right? And he brought together Hassan, Hussein, Fatima, and Ali. They're the Ahlul al-Kiswa, and we'll both call upon God, each side, to curse the one who was a liar. Because what were they debating? They're debating whether Sayyidina Isa was God or not, or the son of God or not, right? So then the Christians, they thought about that, and they're like, we don't want to do the mubahala. So let's just accept the jizya. So they agreed to accept the jizya from Rasulullah. So since they did that, if I've understood this correctly, then by definition, they're the first group to be included in salvation with the Muslims, right? So that leads us to the final point of the jizya, which is rahmah. To have rahmah on people, whether it's physically by saving lives or metaphysically for the next life, right? Clearly, to me, the point of the jizya is to have rahmah on people. So we start with this chapter from the Futuhat 179, right? Right. Now, we're going to go through a slightly long passage just so you get the context of where the jizya is coming from, right? So he tells a story about Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam when a guest came to him, right? So I'm going to go through it briefly. نزل ضيف من غير ملة إبراهيم عليه السلام بإبراهيم عليه السلام. So there was someone who came as a guest to Abraham's house, but he wasn't from his religion, his millah. فقال له إبراهيم عليه السلام وحد الله حتى أكرمك وأضيفك. So unify God, make God one, so that I can serve you and treat you as a guest. So some of the stories say that this was actually a Zoroastrian, a Majus, a Magian. So he's a Magian. So then the Magian says, فقال يا إبراهيم من أجل لقمة أترك ديني ودين آبائي. For one meal, for one bite, literally, you want me to leave my religion and the religion of my fathers? No. فانصرف, so he left. فانصرف عنه فأوحى الله إليه. So then God revealed to him, يا إبراهيم صدقك. What he said to you was correct. لي 70 سنة أرزقه وهو يشرك بي. I fed him for 70 years while he was associating with me and doing shirk. فتريد أنت منه, so you want from him أن يترك دينه ودين آبائه, to leave his religion and the religion of his fathers, لأجل لقمة, just for one bite. فلحقه إبراهيم, فلحقه إبراهيم. So then Ibrahim, he chased after him. وسأله الرجوع إليه ليقريه. So he chased him so he could come back, so that he could serve him as his guest. واعتذر إليه, and apologized to him. فقال له المشرك يا إبراهيم ما بدل لك. Oh Abraham, what happened? فقال, so Sayyidina Ibrahim عليه السلام said, إن ربي عتبني فيك. My Lord chastised me for your sake. وقال, and then he said to me, I'm feeding someone for 70 years and he disbelieves in me, and you وأنت تريد منه, and you أن يترك دينه, and you want him to leave his religion, the religion of his fathers, just for one bite, one meal. So the associator said, أوقد وقع هذا, did that really happen? مثل هذا ينبغي أن يعبد. Is a Lord who's worth worshipping and deserves to be worshipped. فأسلم, so he became Muslim. ورجع مع إبراهيم عليه السلام إلى منزله, and he came back to his house with him. ثم عمت كرامته خلق الله من كل والد ورد عليه. So then Sayyidina Ibrahim عليه السلام, he made his generosity universal to all of God's creatures and whoever came to him. فقيل له في ذلك فقال تعلمت الكرم من ربي. Right? I learned about generosity from my Lord. I saw that he would not leave any of his enemies. Actually, he would not let any of his enemies become lost or destroyed. رأيته لا يضيع عداؤه. So I will not let his enemies be destroyed either. فَلَا أُضِيعُهُمْ. I will not let them become lost. وَأَوْحَى اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. So God revealed to him, أَنْتَ خَلِيلِي حَقًّا. You are truly my Khalil, my intimate friend, my saint. Right? That's the point of the story. Then we come to the last chapter, chapter 520, which gets to the crux of this whole issue. So Sheikh Al-Akbar says in this chapter, extraordinary chapter, بل رأيت جماعة ممن ينازعون في اتساع رحمة الله. I have seen a group of people who have disputed the vastness of God's mercy. وأنها مقصورة على طائفة خاصة فحجروا وضيقوا ما وسع الله. So they have constricted, a certain group of people have constricted the vastness of God's mercy and confined it to, and they made it narrow, and they've confined it to a certain group alone. فلو أن الله لا يرحم أحدا من خلقه لحرم رحمته من يقول بهذا. If God were to not have mercy on anyone in his creation, he would not have mercy upon the people who said that, who said he can't be merciful except to us or to a certain group of people. ولكن أبى الله إلى شمول الرحمة. Except Allah has refused. He has refused to do that, and he only accepts that his mercy should encompass the whole of humanity and everyone. فمنا من يأخذها بطريقة الوجوب. So there's some of us who take that mercy by way of what's called the way of obligation. وهم الذين يتقون ويؤتون الزكاة. There are people who fear God and pay the charity. الذين يؤمنون, who believe in Him. ويتبعون الرسول, believe and follow the messengers. Right? الرسول النبي, the الأمي, who follow the messenger, the prophet, the unlettered prophet, who's Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ومنا من يأخذها, and there's those of us who take the mercy بطريقة الامتنان, by way of grace. من عين المنة, right? والفضل, through pure فضل, which is like, the word escapes me now, but it's preference, right? But graciousness and preference, right? The divine fadl, the divine not generosity, there's another word, but anyways. Wallahi, huh? Sorry? Favor, yes, exactly. The divine favor, thank you. Through the divine favor. Wallahi, ما أنا بحمد لله ممن يحب التشفي والانتقام. And I swear by God, I'm not one of those who loves revenge or vengeance. So by tashafi means revenge, but it's vengeance, but it comes from the word shifa. So it's the revenge that heals you when you take your revenge. Like you take your revenge and it's over, you're healed. So I'm not someone who will do that. Wal intiqam, and intiqam is a revenge that does not heal. I don't take intiqam or tashafa or tashafi. من عباد الله, against God's servants. بل خلقني الله رحمة. بل no, God has created me as a mercy. وجعلني ورث رحمة لمن قيل له. He has made me an inheritor of the one. He has made me and to inherit the mercy of the one to whom it was said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you except as a mercy to all the worlds. وَمَا خَصَّ مُؤْمِنًا مِنْ غَيْرِ. And he did not specify a believer over someone else, which is the unbeliever. What is he talking about here? He made me an inheritor to the one whom it was said, we have sent you not except as a mercy to all the worlds. He's talking about himself as well as the seal of Muhammad's sainthood. خاتم الولاية المحمدية. وتحقق ذلك في وضع الجزية. And this is established by imposing the jizya, the poll tax on the أهل الكتاب. وما كان سبب في إنزال هذه الآية إلا دعاءه بالمؤاخذة الإلهية على المشركين. And the only reason this verse was sent down was because of the divine curse that Rasulullah wanted to make against the mushrikun, right? من رعل وذكوان وعصية, against the tribes that are called Ra'al and Dhakwan and Asiyah. What's the story? Rasulullah sent 70 of the Sahaba who memorized the Quran to teach the Mushrikun the Quran. The Mushrikun slaughtered those companions. So Rasulullah prayed in his qunut to curse those Mushrikun, but then that ayah came down and said, no, don't curse them. We didn't send you as a cursor, we sent you as a rahmatan lil alameen, so don't curse them. وإذا كان هذا عتبه لرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم, if Rasul was chastised, told off, right, rebuked, if he was rebuked for this thing against the mushrik, the associator, الذي أخبر أنه لا يغفر له, whom it was reported that Allah will not forgive him, فكيف الأمر في غير مشرك? So what is the affair? How is the affair with the non-associate, with the non-polytheist? وإن لم يؤمن, even if he doesn't believe in Muhammad, فافتح عين فهمك. So open the eye of your understanding, or even open your mind. بما when you read وقل ربي زدني علما, and I'll skip this because we're out of time. Just a few more slides left. So jizya is levied for the sake of rahmah. And the messenger of God was sent as a mercy to all the world, not just believers. So it is wrong to restrict mercy to one group or person alone. And that's shown in the prophetic moral behavior of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam and Muhammad salam, but also Isa will come to him next week. Now, that's the end of that. There's still a couple of applications left. Two slides left for abrogation and subsistence. So let's go through them very quickly. The issue of including other religions. So here he's talking about a legal question about the permissibility of praying in synagogues and churches. Can you pray in them or not? So here's the legal question from chapter 69. اختلف الناس في البيع والكنائس. The scholars disagree about praying in synagogues and churches. عني في الصلاة فيها, right? فكره قوم. So one group says it's makruh. What's makruh? It's disliked, like intensely. وأجاز قوم, but another group says no, it's permissible. وفرق قوم, and yet still a third group distinguishes between churches or places of worship that have pictures and those that don't have pictures. قوم وفرق قوم بين أن تكون فيها صور أم لا تكون. Now, what is the اعتبار النفس في ذلك? Which means, what's the metaphor for that in your own soul? What's the metaphor for this question in your soul? He does that throughout the entire chapter. Like he takes these little questions, then he finds the inward interpretation of that in your own soul, in your own inner world. Okay? So he says, هل يناجي الحق شخصان من مرتبة واحدة? Does God talk? It's it's to talk intimately to two people in the same divine level. ذلك عنا لا يصح. So for us, that's not possible. لتوسع إلهي, due to the divine vastness. قال الله تعالى لكل جعلنا منكم شرعة ومنهاجا تفسيرا وإشارة. So God says to each one of you, we've appointed a law and a minhaja, a path, a way of going. He's talking to the prophets. Each prophet has his own law. We've appointed to each of you prophets a law for yourself, and a minhaja. That's the tafsir. The ishara is also, if you look at the word minhaja, you can divide it into three words. Wa min, like min ha, from it. What's ha? The shara, the sharia. Wa minha ja'a, with a hamza, he came. So the ishara is, and from it he came. That means the prophet in question, and the prophet came from this law. Like the law is the mother, and he's the child of that mother. So according to both tafsir and ishara, the divine vastness cannot be repeated, which is alluding to the Sufi Abu Talib Makki's axiom. God does not show himself to two people in the same manner, and it does not show himself to the same person two times in the same way. That's the divine vastness. His appearance to a person never repeats. And to two people, it's never the same appearance. None of us understand God exactly the same way as another person, okay? It never repeats. So therefore, that means there must be different ways of understanding God. There must be, right? If there's different, so he says, هل يناجي الحق شخصان من مرتبة واحدة? So there must be maratib. There must be more than one degree and level. We can't all be in the same level. It's not possible, because otherwise then that wouldn't be divinely vast. So فإن صلينا, so that means there must be different, right, houses of worship. And what happens if there are different houses of worship? Our law encompasses them, and we encompass them. فإن صلينا, so if we pray في مثل هذه, so if we pray in the places like these, في هذه الأماكن, فمن شرعنا, so it's from our law, لا من شرعهم, it's not from their law. فأفهم والله المهم, so understand that God is the inspirer of what I just said. So we are permitted to pray in these places because it's from our law to do so, right? It is permissible. And then this last one, it's the question of giving zakat al-fitr to Jews and Christians. There's a hadith from Darakutni that suggests you can do it. You can do that. Normally, the majority opinion is you cannot do that, but there's a minority opinion based on this hadith that you can give zakat al-fitr to the Jews and Christians, right? Right? So it's based on the hadith. So what's the atabar fi dalika? What's the metaphorical consideration of that in our own soul, right? So he says, هي نية الخير في العمل. It is the intention of doing something good في من ليس من جنسك. It is the intention of doing something good to someone who's not from your own kind. يعود فضله عليك. Its fadl, its favor, its reward goes back to you. وأنا مؤمن بما هو اليهودي والنصراني به مؤمن. I believe in what the Jew and Christian believes in. مي ما هو حق في دينه, with respect to what is true in his religion, وفي كتابه, and what's true in my book. Now, if what is in my book matches what is in his book, I believe in it. I believe in what is true in their book and my book. من حيث إيماني بكتابي, by having faith in my own book. Why? Because in my own book I am required to believe in the existence of their scriptures and their religions. فقال الله تعالى والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسول, right? The believers and all who believe in God and they believe in all the angels and his books and his messengers, we do not distinguish between any one of the messengers. That is, we don't separate them from one another. فمن هناك يخرجها, that means it is from this perspective that we collect tax, so the Muslim collects zakat al-fitr for their sake. فإني ممن أماومه, right? I am one of those who feeds him as well. فإن كتابي يتضمن كتابه, so my book, it's because my book encompasses his book. It includes it, actually. My book includes his book. وديني يتضمن دينه, and my religion includes his religion. فدينه وكتابه مندرجان في كتابي. Both his book and his religion are included in my book. What's مندرجان? in درجة نور أنوار الكواكب في نور الشمس. The sun's light includes light of the stars. It's the exact same word, right? مندرجان في كتابي وفي ديني, right? So just to recap this whole thing, the jizya is the historical mechanism by which other religions remain, right? But it's not the only one. Now this is where it gets interesting. Why? Because he said that their religion is confirmed for them through our religion. So the jizya is what you call a hukum, a ruling. What if there's other rulings? That's what the rest of this course explores. So the jizya is not the only way to preserve the other religions, right? What other ways are there? And furthermore, does one's religious validity simply disappear if the jizya is no longer paid? Like, for example, in our time, there's no longer jizya. So it's a bit pointless to talk about it. The answer is no. There's other ways to remain in the religion. So for Ibn Arabi, the jizya is not implemented to humiliate people of other faiths. That's not what it's about. If there is like a punitive dimension to the tax, it's limited to very specific reasons. There is no punitive dimension just because you belong to a different religion. There's a punitive dimension if you're counteracting a satanic impulse. That goes back to the verses I couldn't explain before because that would take too long to explain. So the jizya is intended to save lives and bring people of other religions into salvation in the next world. That's how it was for the past 1400 years before it was abolished, 100 years ago, according to Ibn Arabi anyways. So therefore, we can conclude the session with this line. The Muhammad Sharia obligates the entire world with responding to it. So it obligates, you're obligated to respond to it. But at the same time, it mercifies the world as well. But at the same time, it has mercy on the world as well, right? So next week, we're going to look into how the Other religions are included not just through the jizya, that goes into the issue of prophetic inheritance. The wirathat al-nubuwah and the spiritual dhawq, spiritual tasting of the prophetic realities, how that continues to exist for the people of the religions. And we'll look into Christian iconography, which Ibn Ari talks about, and the Quran confirms. You'll see that next week. And what's the function of the other laws within Muhammad's overarching law? And connected to this will be the characteristics of the Christian saints, the Christian awliya, which we will look into. And we'll continue building on Ibn Ari's religious pluralism. Thank you very much. Allah Akbar. There's the adhan. Are people still here?
I meant to turn on my audio, not my video. Yes, alhamdulillah, still here.
Alhamdulillah, good.
I had just a funny thought. I'm probably completely crazy, but anyway, you know, like how astaghfirullah, so many of these extremist Muslim Salafi groups going around killing Christians and thinking whatever. I wonder if that, you know, because then the jizya kind of is like, would have been like a protection against that kind of behavior, wouldn't it? Because
yes. Precisely.
Yeah.
No, precisely. Precisely.
Oh.
The jizya is meant to protect minorities. That's what Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi hinted at. And he also says, like, if you don't pay it 1 year, your contract with the state isn't annulled automatically. That's not how it works. And then so like people like Sheikh Hamid Yusuf, what he said was correct. People try to turn the jizya into an ugly thing. It's not an ugly thing. It's not. That's not its purpose, right? Even if some Muslims think it's ugly, it's not. That's just completely wrong. Like the Khulafa al-Rashidun, they used to collect the jizya with respect and treat the people with respect. That's how you're supposed to be, right? But there is no jizya today. It's not appropriate to talk about it today. This is a historical thing. The jizya, to my knowledge, comes back when the Mahdi comes back. The Mahdi comes back, he reimposes the jizya because the whole world is in a complete state of conflict. And then Sayyidina Isa, he comes back and he removes the jizya for the last time.
MashaAllah, thank you.
Most welcome. Are there any questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, Sayyidina. By the way, your comment is beautiful.
Which comment?
The other prophets are now also ours. You're correct.
Yes. And this is what I'd like to expand on. First of all, thank you so much for this presentation, and congratulations for everyone. That we made it to the Holy Eid. Okay, so I have an idea, and I want to check like how this checks with everything, which is that building on the idea of how God is so expansive that there are different ways of understanding, and it's impossible for humanity to encompass it, like from one culture, from like there's this metaphor وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى about this parable of the elephant, and then the blind people trying to understand the elephant from different aspects. So it's like this kind of a vibe, and then to reconnect it with عمارة الأرض, so like custodian and stewardship of the earth. So I noticed, for example, like you see in the shamanic religions or like in the Eastern religions, there's so much like connection with nature, whereas in Arab culture, like that's like it's only camels, and but there is more focus on other aspects. So in conclusion, the idea for me is that like it's as if God has given different tasks to different peoples, and that their religions are are designed to uphold those tasks. And so part of Islam is actually to empower people to uphold the tasks of their own religions, their own books, their own traditions. And then it has this corrective characteristic for any deviation that might have occurred. And this is how I understand inna anzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun, in the sense of both that Al-Quran as a dhikr being preserved by God, and also Quran preserving the other books, because it is
absolutely, that's a beautiful thought. Thank you so much for sharing it, CD. I completely agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to check if I got it right. Okay, thank you. Jazakallah khair. I'm looking forward for the rest. Yes. Yeah.
Allah barak fik. I think that's so beautiful. That really ought to be our function. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Any other questions? If not, then we can call it tonight. And if you have any questions, we can just put it into the chat, right? I'm sure we'll get more questions as people watch the actual video, inshallah. Yeah. Then have a lovely night, everyone, and thank you so much for attending. And I'll see you next week, inshallah. All right, take care. Salam.
Alaikum salam.
All right.